The Holistic Self-Assessment by Derrick Broze. Introduction. Thank you for choosing to take this journey towards self-healing. I appreciate every person who finds this work and considers employing the practices contained within it. The goal of the Holistic Self-Assessment is to serve as a guide that allows individuals to examine their own lives and identify inconsistencies between their thoughts, words, and actions. The term holistic is related to the theory known as holism. Holism is a philosophy concerned with wholes or with complete systems. When examining whole systems rather than the individual pieces of a particular problem, you are likely to come away with a completely different perspective, and thus a different solution than you would likely find when studying the individual components. We will explore this concept later in the book. For now, let's just say this particular self-assessment is not about simply changing your diet to organic or adding yoga or meditation to your routine. While I absolutely recommend doing those things, I also believe the answer lies in taking the holistic approach by looking at your entire life and seeking to understand how you relate to the world. What is the relationship between your actions and your family, the political class, the environment, and the culture you live in? Are these relationships and actions aligned with your principles and goals? That is what we aim to find out. In my experience, I have found that many well-meaning individuals consistently struggle with achieving their goals or living up to what they view as their highest potential. I believe this is because the human species is in need of deep emotional healing. Humanity's history is filled with violence, war, enslavement, rampant environmental destruction, and more recently, the re-emergence of the threat of nuclear war. Not to mention, there are individuals who seek to use the instruments of government and corporate power to enrich themselves. This has led to the creation of a species whose members exist in various states of recovery from the trauma of the human condition. It is an often overwhelming reality, but it does us no good to deny or ignore it. We can work to change this reality by changing ourselves. Many people also deal with personal trauma from environmental factors experienced throughout childhood. In this state of trauma, it is surprising that we are easily manipulated and controlled by external forces, and it is important that we work to reclaim our hearts and minds. This trauma leads some down the path of self-medication through drugs, inflicting self-harm, and other destructive behaviors. I personally know full well the results of succumbing to unhealthy habits. In November 2005, I was arrested for possession of a controlled substance after being caught with crystal methamphetamine. I was 1 week away from turning 21 and had been sober off meth for 1 month after spending the previous 10 months racing to rock bottom. Long story short, I had been using various drugs off and on for about 3 years in an effort to escape my depression and self-esteem issues. I spent most of my youth abusing my body with drugs and inflicting self-harm through cutting, as well as destroying relationships with people I loved. It took me getting locked up for 18 months to figure out that I wanted a different life. I discovered meditation while incarcerated and began to understand the power of self-reflection and healing. I journaled every day for 6 months and found I was starting to understand the root of my pain and the choices I made while lost on my emotional roller coaster. The book you are reading is a representation of the steps I took myself through during that period. It is a representation of the process I continue to explore as I work to become the best version of myself that I can be. One of the major reasons we struggle with our self-worth is that we often set goals that seem appealing enough, but upon closer examination, come to realize they do not actually represent our deepest desires. We are influenced by our parents, friends, the media, and a myriad of other external forces. It can be difficult to recognize whether your life choices and personal habits are a result of your own choosing or one of these external sources. Either way, this problem illustrates the need for maintaining an open and positive relationship and conversation with ourselves. By developing this dialogue, we can identify our own doubts, fears, and insecurities and work to understand and overcome them. Through this process, I believe we can each work towards actualizing what we see as the highest version of ourselves. This book is designed to help you in the process of self-actualization, a term that has various meanings in the field of psychology. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory asserted that once an individual's basic needs are met, the person can reach their full potential via self-actualization. I define self-actualization as the process of aligning one's external image, the image we portray to others, especially via social media, and the external image of ourselves we see in our own mind. I do not know if human beings are capable of ever actually achieving self-actualization and existing as perfectly aligned individuals. But then again, the entire premise is based on subjective standards. Each of us has a different vision of what an ideal life looks like. We each have a different version of perfection or happiness. We can benefit from working towards developing as deep a connection to our own hearts and minds as possible. That is where our journey will begin. Each chapter is designed to answer a question. The answer to these questions will arise through your participation in the readings and exercises. As you answer the questions, you will hopefully start to understand more about how you view yourself and why you make the choices you do. You will also uncover opportunities to make improved choices that are more in line with your values and goals. The first chapter starts out with a simple question that is often difficult to answer. Who am I? After getting to know more about your personal view of yourself, you will ask what it means to have principles and what principles guide you individually and as human beings. Next, you will look at your goals and habits and ask what it means to live holistically. You will then be given an opportunity to examine all of your current relationships to see if they are in line with your previously stated principles and goals. From there, you will look at the root causes of your inconsistencies and ask what keeps you from achieving your unique goals. Finally, the guidebook offers several exercises to assist you in implementing beneficial changes that will help you to live out your vision of your best self. You will also have an opportunity to develop an action plan for moving forward and keeping track of your progress. This process asks you to open up your heart and mind, set aside any self-doubt or anxiety, or at least be compassionately conscious of it, and consider participating in the assessment one step closer to aligning your internal vision of yourself with the self you present to the world. This guidebook only functions if the reader is an active participant. You will only get back what you put in. So if you choose to hold back some of your deep truths and not be completely honest with yourself, do not expect to experience healing in those areas. Also, do not expect the unhealthy behaviors that can likely be traced back to these unexplored emotional spheres to magically go away. It took me 3 trips to state prisons before I finally made the necessary life changes for my next stage of growth. I understood the changes before that point, and I could recite the solutions without hesitation, but it took a bit longer before I was ready to be completely honest with myself and began the process of healing. When you answer the questions, take your time. Take in each word, reflect on the meaning, and spend a few minutes meditating on the answer. The more specific and detailed your answers, the deeper your understanding will be. Remember, this book is meant for you. It is your choice whether you share your findings with anyone, but I believe it will be more beneficial if you are honest and vulnerable when working through the steps. This guidebook is here whenever you need it and as many times as you need it. If the first time you work through it you are not ready to be completely vulnerable, give yourself some time to reflect and come back when you feel more open. Thank you so much for embarking on this journey towards healing, empowerment, and self-actualization. Together, we are contributing towards the emotional, psychological, and spiritual evolution of our species. Chapter 1. Becoming Self-Aware. Question: Who am I? Take a moment to reflect on these 3 words: who, am, and I. The word who in this sense is an interrogative word, meaning it's designed to answer a question. The word am is the present tense first person version of be and implies that an object has an objective sense. I think, therefore I am. Finally, I can be used as a pronoun to describe an individual. In this sense, I is defined as, quote, the person who is speaking or writing. Taken together as a question, these words compel us to understand who and what we are interested in being and doing while on this planet. To come to an honest understanding of ourselves and what we are capable of, we ought to examine our personal view of ourselves. First, we should briefly look at the concept of the self. The dictionary definition of self is the entire person of an individual, or an individual's typical character or behavior. It is also defined as the union of elements such as body, emotions, thoughts, and sensations that constitute the individuality and identity of a person. Carl Rogers, an American psychologist and one of the founders of the humanistic school of psychology, believed the self was composed of 3 different components: self-image, self-esteem, or self-worth, and the ideal self. These 3 components are important to consider when attempting to answer the question, who am I? What is your image of yourself as defined above? How much do you value your life? Do you value what you have to offer the world? What is your vision of your ideal self? Rogers believed Maslow's hierarchy of needs was correct minus one vital omission: the need for an open and loving environment. Rogers said that without an environment that provides openness, acceptance, and empathy, healthy relationships and personalities will be impaired. Rogers actually cultivated this mentality in his own counseling approach, which he referred to as client-centered therapy. In a way, this book attempts to embody the spirit of Rogers' idea by being reader-focused. Lastly, Rogers believed it was possible for all people to achieve their goals should these conditions be met. This will be important to consider later in the guidebook as we examine our relationships. Following in the footsteps of Rogers, sociologist Manfred H. Kuhn helped develop the 20 statements test as a standardized way to measure one's self-concept or identity. Self-concept has been explained as the sum total of any being's knowledge of his or herself. In 1960, Kuhn published Self-Attitudes by Age, Sex, and Professional Training, a study that used the 20-statement test to research the self-concepts of a wide range of individuals. Kuhn asked people to answer the question, "Who am I?" in 20 different ways. According to Kuhn's research, responses to this question can be narrowed down to 5 categories: social roles and classifications, ideological beliefs, interests, ambitions, and self-evaluations. The study found that the responses varied according to the age and sex of the participant. These responses indicated that as individuals, we often answer the question, "Who am I?" by referring to external aspects of ourselves. Sometimes people think of themselves in regards to their relationship with those around them or their profession, including mother, father, friend, journalist, teacher, etc. Other outward elements of their identities can include their education, their past actions, or perhaps the amount of money they have or do not have. These are examples of external attributes of who we are, but they do not address the root of who we are as powerful beings, both physical and spiritual. Other times, individuals answer the question by describing personality traits. They say they are caring, compassionate, hilarious, or impatient. But again, these words are only describing aspects of the self, not the whole image. Quite simply, you are not your job, you are not your relationship, you are not your physical or mental traits. You are something more, something beyond these categories, yet composed of each of them. This does not mean it's wrong for you to answer these questions by describing your profession, or your family, or your finances. You should absolutely be honest when answering this question. If the first response to the question is to describe how wonderful your sense of style is, write it. However, it is important to recognize that these traits are only a small piece of who you are as a beautiful, free human full of potential. The more honest you are, the more you will learn about yourself, and the greater your opportunity for growth. We ought to consider the possibility that the people we present to the world in our daily lives are not complete representations of our personalities. We might also consider the possibility that there are facets of our personalities we have censored from our own conscious minds. This chapter is about uncovering those hidden aspects of our character. Sociologist Erving Goffman believed that when an individual meets other people, they attempt to control or guide the perception others develop of them by controlling or altering their setting, appearance, and manner. Goffman believed every one of us engages in practices to avoid being embarrassed or embarrassing others. Goffman expanded upon his theories in his 1956 book titled The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. He described social interaction as a theatrical performance where the performers, individuals, are on stage in front of the audience, the public. While on stage, individuals emphasize their best attributes. Behind the curtain, backstage, they prepare for their role. To perfect the role, individuals carefully select their dress and look. From this perspective, every one of us has a public persona and a more private, backstage self. There is nothing wrong or immoral about this. Each of us reserve the right to reveal ourselves at will. However, we can also take the time to become self-aware by understanding our true self, our motivations, aspirations, fears, and insecurities. To do so, we begin by attempting to understand who we are as individuals. Look at your thoughts, your words, your choices, your actions, and your character. How do you feel about the person you present to the world? How about the person backstage? Are these two people closely aligned, or is there a gap between the two personalities? When these two worlds are in tune, you are living your truth. The person you view yourself on the inside reflects the person you share with the world. This does not mean we cannot keep certain aspects of our personality to ourselves or a select few people. However, once you are comfortable with who you are, both on stage and backstage, there will be less conflict within your heart and mind as you experience the freedom of being your true self. Exercise. Take a few days to reflect on the person you share with the world and the person you are when no one is around. Keep a log of your personal thoughts and experiences when you're alone, as well as a log of the conversations and experiences you have with the outside world. Reflect on the question, who am I? What attributes and characteristics do you associate with yourself? Are these positive or negative? Write down all the different attributes that come to mind, both physical and emotional, and take note of how you view yourself. For example, are you kind, caring, supportive, anxious, doubtful, and or quick to anger? Consider the emotions and actions that you associate with your ideal self. Describe these qualities that you work to embody. Think about your relationships. How do you treat other people? How does your behavior toward them make you feel? This may take time to work through, so be patient with yourself. Consider specifically the way you communicate with others. Think about times when people have told you how you make them feel. No matter what they shared, whether it's flattering toward you or not, take the time to honestly assess their perspective. Ask yourself how much truth there is in these words. Take time to note how it makes you feel to view yourself through others' eyes. Understanding how you view yourself is one of the most important exercises. Be honest and patient when attempting to answer these questions.